Now, have you ever heard of the terms Transatlantic Exodus? This is a movement that is happening right now where African Americans or people of African descent, right, are relocating back to Africa. Now, the African governments are doing something incredible. They are actually creating programs that grant citizenship to any person of African descent, right? Now, this sounds like a fantastic idea, and more people are taking advantage of this. But somebody posed the question, an African American woman said to me the other day, why would I ever want to move to Nigeria when the Nigerians themselves are looking to exit Nigeria, right? And her statement begged me to think of more questions, such as, is this idea of transatlantic exodus, is it a romanticized vision of Africa by African Americans, right? Now, why do we all of a sudden have an influx of African Americans relocating to Africa? And last but not least, are these African leaders' way of correcting the wrong of the past? There's so much to explore on this episode, so let's dive into it. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. My name is Moitinya, and I'm a visual storyteller who happens to be visually impaired, and I love to cover African story. Now, if this is your first time stopping by, welcome. If you've been here for a while, thank you and welcome. And do not forget to subscribe and click on the notification bell to be the first to receive any of our new content. Now, the thing about this particular story or topic, it was overwhelming. There's so much information. And I was searching for the best way to share this with you, and I believe I found it. So let's jump right into the story. Now, this transatlantic exodus that we're looking at today, it's not a golden phenomenon. It's something that has been gradually building itself over time. I'll give you some example. In 1847, this was when the Return Back to Africa movement was established. 13,000 freed African Americans were thrown to Liberia. You know, they they throw them in Liberia. They send them to Liberia. The US government actually did this, sent them to Liberia. I remember when I read the book, This Child Will Be Great. That was when I was actually introduced to this idea. And it was by Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. She's the first female president of Africa, first woman ever to become a president in Africa. She was the president of Liberia. And in her book, This Child Will Be Great, she talks about that influx, the 13,000 people, or 13,000 freed African Americans who came and lived in Liberia, and there were issues there surrounding that topic. We'll talk about that some other time. Now we fast forward, right? We look at Marcus Garvey between the 19th and 20th century. They had this movement called Back to Africa movement, where he was advocating for African Americans to relocate back to Africa. Now, if you don't know who Marcus Garvey is, he was a Black nationalist, he was an activist, he was a Jamaican-born that was really pushing for that back to Africa movement. Now, we fast forward to 1970, Nina Simone, which is an American singer, a very brilliant singer, lived in Liberia in the 70s, right? We have Maya Angelou, an African-American writer based in the US, right? We say an American writer. She also lived in Ghana between 1950 and 1962, I believe. Now, more recently, Rita Ama, this is Bob Marley's wife. She's currently living in Ghana. She's lived in Ghana for the last 20 years. She has a Ghanaian name as well. So it's not a golden phenomenon. What we're seeing today, right? It has been a gradual shift for a while. But what makes this moment very unique is this. We're seeing more and more African Americans settling now in Africa, right? I believe between 2019 and 2022 or so, about 1,500 African Americans have relocated and now living in Ghana. Obviously, that number has grown and the number continues to grow, right? So it is a growing movement. We're going to be talking about that some more. So now, before we proceed, I would like us to watch two videos. Actually, my producer is saying the videos are too long. But let's watch a little portion of one of the videos at least. Okay, let's watch that right now.
It is unsafe in the States, no matter where you go, if you look like us. Getting out of the land of our enemy was priority number one, to make sure that no matter what we did to build a business or to simply just live the simple life, we will be protected in that.
For me, even I think back when I was in school, and doing university, I remember I used to go on my phone and try to find like an app to look at, to listen to radio stations in Accra, just to hear the language. And I remember one night I was just sitting there and like, I almost just cried, just to not to know that like this was taken from me.
You're
Like,
shaking now
yeah.
you have goosebumps everywhere, actually.
Because my great grandmothers, these are the songs that they would sing. These are the languages that they would use, and we don't have them anymore. And it's even hard to explain, like, how that stealing of our identity impacts our hearts.
That was heavy. Now, see, I can't continue this conversation without telling you what's on my heart, right? I have always believed one of the most powerful groups in the world, right, is the African American ethnic group. I have to put it that way. And as I do this story, as I research about this subject matter, it became more apparent. Simply because imagine everything stripped away from you, and you have to start over. You know, today we have Africans living in their respective countries, and they come here, they build their lives, but they still have a place to go back to if they ever choose to. That's not the case for African Americans, right? But they decided that they want to live in America, right? And they created a culture outside of what has been taken away from them. So you and I both know that they are indeed the most powerful groups in the world, right? They are indeed powerful. Now that I said that, let's go back into my story. So as I was telling you, the question that I began with was why. So the person who told me, it was a colleague of mine who said, why would they ever want to move to Nigeria when Nigerians themselves are moving to the US, right? I've talked about this over and over if you're following my show. The type of people that come to the Americas, the type of people, the kind of people, the individuals that decides to pack their bags and decide that they want to come to America are not the wealthy people, right? They are the people who are trying to make ends meet. They are the middle class and the bottom class and the lower class. Once the opportunity presents itself, they come to the US and they're able to work and send money home to build their businesses and to build their families out of poverty. Now, I remember reading a book by James Baldwin years ago, right? And I read many things from James Baldwin, so I can remember what book I read. But I know this is not my idea, this is his. He said that the difference between African and African Americans, right, are two things. Africans, our problem is environmental. We have bad governance, bad leadership. We don't have the best hospitals. We don't have the best education, depending on how poor or how wealthy you are. Right? That's debatable. But then you notice that when Africans leave Africa, I don't care what part of Africa they're from, whether it's Nigeria, whether it's Kenya, and they come to the US, they tend to excel. That's to let you know that the system here, in a lot of sense, is designed to help people progress, right? There are opportunities here, there are resources here for those of you who wants to elevate your lives, right? And Africans take advantage of this. Now, when you look at the African American side, a lot of the issues psychological, right? We're looking at years of enslaved people. We're looking at traumas that these individuals have carried. When I say these individuals, it sounds like I'm removing myself from the reality. I believe it's a shared experience to a certain extent, right? But African Americans carried all of this, and it affected them for generations and generations, right? So when these people leave this oppressed system, just like the video you watched, right? They go to Africa where all you gotta have is money. Money talks in Africa, And they're taking their monies, they're taking their resources, their, retirement fund, all the things they saved. And they go to a place like Accra. And then they start to build houses. They go put their children in the best schools. So the life of an African American in Africa is an African person's dream. That's what Africa had to leave, or Africans had to leave to America to acquire. So you see that it's a very weird dynamic happening, but it was what became apparent to me when I was doing this research, right? We all want very similar things, but how we acquire these things are, in a sense, very different, right? An African dream is to have a home and have a home. It's basically what Africans are trying to do here. Why an African American going to Africa? It's basically what an African person would want to acquire in Africa can't, because of the environmental factor and lack of capital, right? Why an African Americans coming in do have the capital, so they're able to build that dream. Are you clear? Because hopefully I haven't confused you. Those are what I got from doing this video. So I think the biggest misconception in all of this is the fact that African Americans have little knowledge about Africa. Africans themselves don't have as much information about African Americans. But now we're seeing that the culture are being moved, right? Africans are coming to America and trying to understand to a certain extent, depending on who you speak to, depending on how open-minded this person is. They're looking to understand the reality of an African American. At some point in our time here, those of us who are from Africa, we're going to face discrimination, we're going to face racism. You can't escape that. This country is structured around that, right? Now, I want to point out something. When I came to the US 2002, the people who bullied me were African Americans, and I also bullied them back. We didn't say nice things to each other for sure. But I realized back then, as I know now, that the story that's been told about Africa for the longest is being the poor continent and everybody is starving and all that. I think what we are seeing right now is this. Africans are beginning to show the other part of Africa that is not being shown in the mainstream media. We have several African movies that does this. I mean, what's the called? Famous and Africa and Famous. There are other shows out there that is showing a different perspective about Africa. So there we're starting to see that influx of African Americans, because some African Americans are going back to Africa and they are actually having a taste for themselves what it would be like to live in Africa. So I think that's one of the ideas. The narrative is different. It's changing. You know that you can live in Africa when you have money. Those who have money are the people who enjoy Africa. It is not people like you and I that don't have money yet, but African Americans are with the capital. So they are going in and they are romanticizing the idea of Africa. But then there are people who will say things like, you haven't gone to the hospitals yet. You haven't gone to the schools yet. Your school haven't striked where your kids are home for 6-7 months. That's the reality of Africa, right? That's why we're looking for something more stable. And America has a very stable system, meaning kids are able to go to school. Hopefully that's not changed. You have a really good medical facility here. If you want to do surgery, you're not too worried. That's not the same case when it comes to African countries. It's changing, but it's not there yet, right? So this idea of romanticizing, there's some level of truth to the romanticization. When you have money in Africa, it is not entirely true. The same thing stereotype goes, right? Anyhow, y'all, it's crazy. That makes me laugh. So the last question for this episode is this: are African leaders trying to make an attempt to correct the wrong of the past? This was very emotional to me, right? It was emotional because when you think about the transatlantic slave trade and what it took away from African Americans, it took away practically everything. I know that there are some countries that are making citizenship, countries in Africa that have citizenship programs that makes it easier for any person of African descent. So not only African Americans, there are people living in Brazil that are looking to settle in Africa. There are people living in Colombia. You have all these people returning back to Africa and making Africa a home. Now, I saw this article that almost brought me to tears, right? I've never been to Ghana, but I know that in Ghana, in Cape Coast Castle, this was where the slaves were thrown into, right? Where they were housing them before they shipped them off to the US, right? When you go to that castle, it has the door of no return, right? And it's in that castle. Also in Nigeria, we also have something very similar in Badagry Beach. This is a beach we used to dance and play as a kid. There's a structure in that area as well, where it says the door of no return as well, right? So what Ghana decided to do as a way to bring this all around, right? Because I don't think the ancestors knew that their children will ever come back home. So what African leaders are doing, they're trying to bring and encourage more Africans or people of African descent to come back home. So Ghana started a movement called the Door of Return, right? It's a thing, and it started in 2019. And basically, it is just encouraging more people of African descent to come back home. So it really brings the story into like a 360, what's it called? A 360 movement, right? Where it happens where they exited from that door and it says the door of no return, right? And now we're having the door of return or the year of return, encouraging more Africans to come back home. So yes, to answer that question, the question that I posed, African leaders are looking for ways to correct the wrong of the past, of their past ancestors. And I don't think there's a better way to do this by encouraging more African Americans or people of African descent to return back to Africa. Now, there's a video that I want to share with you. It's the last video for this episode. And I thought it was quite interesting. And I want us to watch that very quickly, right?
Since there's so many of y'all on here talking about go back to Africa, you should go, blah, blah, blah. I decided to ask ChatGPT, Chat, what would happen if all Black Americans left the U.S. and returned to Africa? And one thing ChatGPT do not do is lie, baby. So this is what ChatGPT said. This is food for thought for everybody who's saying go back to Africa. So first, Black Americans make up 14% of the U.S. population and contribute significantly to healthcare, education, sports, entertainment, government. And a sudden departure would create significant labor shortages. That's one. Two, Black Americans contribute over $1.7 trillion annually to the U.S. economy. A departure like that would create a sudden loss of economic power. Three, Black-owned businesses which employ millions of Americans would shut down or relocate, shifting the wealth to whatever country all of us went to. Number 4. Now this one gonna really piss you off. This one gonna piss you off. Loss of cultural influence. Black Americans, and I quote, Black Americans have shaped U.S. culture through jazz, hip-hop, and blues, fashion, language, and sports. Their departure would significantly alter America's cultural identity. Here's where it gets good again. A decline in innovation. Blacks foster creativity and innovation. The loss of racial diversity could slow technological advances. See, y'all ancestors ain't tell y'all how sick y'all was. See, y'all before y'all found us, y'all was fighting.
Here we are. The lady said it best. You know, it's a gradual movement. We obviously know that not everybody will take advantage of it. But I think for me in all of this is the fact that you're able to do so if you want to, right? If an African American wants to leave Africa, if they want to stay in Africa, they have the rights to do so. If they want to stay in America, they have the rights to do so. To me, that's indeed luxury, right? I do want to thank you all for watching this video. I am curious to hear your thoughts on the subject matter, right? Let me know what you think about the Transatlantic Exodus. Is this something you're considering? And also, is the idea of Africa or African Americans moving back to Africa, is it romanticized? You think they're romanticizing that? Or you think Wahala has not hit yet? And last but not least, you think that African leaders are looking to correct the wrong of the past as well? I'm always curious to hear your opinions on these subject matter, or these questions rather. I do want to thank you for watching, and we'll see you again on the next episode. Stay tuned for more great content.